Today is Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday, and as we get into Palm Sunday, one of the first things that we're going to look at in the meaning of that is the King's arrival. Because as Jesus comes into Jerusalem at the end of his earthly ministry, he comes into Jerusalem as a king. As a king, and he's recognized as a king. So the King's arrival is going to be what we're talking about today, and as we talk about it, it's going to be funny, or maybe not funny, but seem weird. Weird's a much better way to describe this, that I'm going to mention that for several Easters now, I have had this desire to put up a prop here in the service of a Christmas tree at Easter time, because it makes more sense to me. Our Easter tradition of going and hunting eggs seems strange to me, whereas our Christmas tradition of receiving gifts seems more appropriate at Easter to me. At Christmas, it's hard for me to fathom why we do the gift exchange. I'm not bashing on Christmas. I love Christmas. I love giving gifts and receiving gifts. I'm just saying it seems strange to me. I get it. Some people will argue, well, we do the gifts because the wise men brought Jesus gifts. So we symbolize Christ receiving gifts, so we take that on ourselves to say, you know what makes sense? Why don't we receive gifts? You know, like, not the king, why don't we receive gifts? Why don't we make it about ourselves? Or we might go down a little deeper theological ride and go, well, no, we're celebrating baby Jesus, who is the gift to us. And that makes sense. But if that's true, then Easter we should receive double gifts, because if Jesus is the gift for us, and that's what we're celebrating, Easter is the actual representation of that gift. Easter is the time of where Christ sacrifices himself so that we might have salvation. And so in that gift is what we're going to be talking about today. Christ is a gift to all of us. In the everyday, not just at Easter, but in the everyday, do we see it that way? As the king arrives in Jerusalem, the first thing that we're going to see is that he fulfills prophecy. Luke 19:28 through 35 says, "And when he had said these things, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And when he drew near to Bethpage and Bethany at the mount that is called Olivet, he sent two of his disciples, saying, Go into the village in front of you, where on entering you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever sat. Untie it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you, Why are you untying it? You shall say this, The Lord has need of it." So those who were sent went away and found it just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, his owner said to them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they said, "The Lord has need of it." And they brought it to Jesus. Throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. Pause. There's so much happening here, and it's just really like one of those beginnings where you're like, I just want to get to the meat of the story. There's a lot of meat right here. There's so much going on that shows the majesty of the Lord. First of all, it's a fulfillment of prophecy. Back in Zechariah 9:9, hundreds upon hundreds of years earlier, it was prophesied that rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you, righteous, and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. It was prophesied hundreds upon hundreds of years before that Jesus would do this very thing. That he would enter into Jerusalem on a donkey as their king. That in itself is amazing. What does that do? Well, prophecy is one of those things where we see the faithfulness of God. God not only knows everything outside of time, what has been, what is going on, and what will be. God knows every single thing, but God has a plan. And when we see that, when we see prophecy fulfilled, what we see is that God not only had a plan, but he kept true to his word. He told you it was going to happen, it has happened, and he delivered. So God is above time. But let's look at some of the smaller things that are going on. Did you catch in this story that he told his disciples to go into Jerusalem and not go up and knock at a person's door and say, hey, can we borrow this for the Lord? He said, no, just go into their yard, untie the colt that's never been ridden, and if they ask what you are doing, I don't know if you realize how big a deal that is. A donkey and in other areas, colts, horses, camels. Up until maybe 100 years ago, this would have been one of the most serious crimes that you could have committed. Do you understand that? Even in the Old Testament, if you go back and look at the laws in the Old Testament, if in the Old Testament you were to go and you were to destroy a man's house, you would have to pay retribution for that house. If you were to take their oxen, their cattle, or you would be stoned to death. Difference of violation, right? All the way till 100 years ago, even here in our country, same exact rules by law. If you were to go and destroy somebody's house, then you had to, by law, now that person may come and shoot you, but you might, by law, you would have to pay back the retribution of the house, the worth of the house. But if you stole their horse, you would be hanged. Because it represented more than just their way to travel. It represented their livelihood. Jesus told the disciples to go into someone's yard, not knock on the door, not ask them, not anything like that. Go and untie this colt. And if they asked you what you're doing in this crime that can get you stoned, you tell them, I'm doing it for the Lord. Not only did he tell them if they did that, guess what really happened? It says in this passage that while they were untying the colt, someone said, what are you doing? Right? Like, this is a crime. And the disciples went and they said, okay, well, the Lord said to do it, we'll do it. And the person, when they heard him say that, the person was fine. One more step to this. This colt is a donkey. This donkey has never been ridden before. They bring this donkey back that's never been ridden before. They put coats on it, and Jesus just sits on it. You may think, and there may be many of you in here that have been to a rodeo, and you think you've seen some things. You're like, oh, they got on that horse, and that bronco, and they let him buck him, and they got on that bull and everything. You do not sit on a donkey. They don't even have like donkeys in the rodeo that are unbroken. Like any donkeys that are in the rodeo, they won't bring them in because donkeys don't quit kicking. They'll never quit kicking. If you get bucked off that, they can't calm a donkey down. There's a reason why there's an expression, donkey kick. There's no expression out there, I've been horse kicked, I've been bull kicked. Donkey kicking is bad, right? Like this donkey's never been ridden on, and they just sit Jesus on it and he just rides in. Never been broken. God demonstrates in this one passage that he's sovereign over time, he's sovereign over man, and he's sovereign over nature. That he's in control. Doesn't matter what he comes up against, he is in control. And that's a beautiful message as we're looking at the King entering into Jerusalem. It not only fulfills prophecy, it symbolizes everything that God is. And it symbolizes God's desire to enter into Jerusalem as a king, but as a humble king. Because a king wouldn't ride in on a donkey, but Jesus does. Now when he comes, and we're about to read this passage, when he comes in, the people are going to start celebrating. They're going to start doing things because they see him as a king coming in. They have a certain expectation that he's coming in. As I get into that, I'm going to try something here, okay? I want all of you, every single one of you, to just play along with me, okay? We're going to pretend like today we went over to kids' church, and we're going to do something that maybe the kids would do. I want every single one of you to look around this room. Look around this room. Take in everything that you can. What I'm about to ask you is I want you to pick out 5 separate things, okay, that are black. All right, you've been taking in, close your eyes. Now, by raising your hands, do you believe that you could pick out and say out loud 5 things that are black? Raise your hand if you believe you can. Put your hands down. Don't open your eyes. Raise your hand if you can tell me 5 things that are red. Man, all of you that were raising your hands, right? You know why? You can open your eyes now. You know why? You could tell me because I told you ahead of time what to look for, and so you were looking for something specifically, and you could do it. You could find it. You could find it because you were looking for 5 black things. Right when you closed your eyes, I told you that. You would be harder pressed in this room to find 5 red things. As soon as I said it, I could count the microphone. All right, as soon as I said it, I could only come up with 4 myself, and I had my eyes open. But 5 red things. If you're looking for something, you can find it. Even if you're making it fit the pattern that you're looking for. When Jesus came into Jerusalem, the people were looking for a king, and when he came in, that's exactly what they found. In Luke 19:36 through 40, and it says, "And as he rode along on this donkey, they spread their cloaks on the road. As he was drawing near, already on the way down the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had been seen, saying, 'Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest.' And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, 'Teacher, rebuke your disciples.' He answered, 'I tell you, if these were silent, then the very stones would cry out.'" Another little illustration that he has complete control over nature, over everything. But as he's coming in, the people see a king, and they start rejoicing, they start celebrating, they start being invigorated, full of joy because Jesus, the king, is coming. This is what they've been told to look for. This is what they see coming down. Now I want to explain a little bit about this passage, the significance of this passage. That there's a lot going on with that crowd that we need to be aware of. That when they see Jesus coming, they must really, really believe he is the king. And not something else, not maybe like a showman, or they're like the miracle maker's coming, or like other people are excited and they're running down there because they're like, oh, you really got to see this person. No, they really believe he is the king. I think I shared this in Life Group, but not too long ago, there was an actor, Paul Rudd. You don't have to know who he is, but they were interviewing a couple of people, a couple of actors, and one of the questions was a crazy question. They asked them, they said, if you could meet anybody, even in history, even if they're dead, if you can meet anybody to ask them some questions, like you've got 15 minutes with them, who would you meet? And I don't know who the other two said, but Paul Rudd was the last one to answer, and he said, Jesus. Now, Paul Rudd's not a Christian. He even said in the little interview, he said, I'm not even a good practicing Jew. He's Jewish. But the other actors looked at him surprised, and then they laughed. He's like, no, I'm serious. You know, Jesus was real. He's historically real. He wasn't pointing to the Bible. He was pointing towards historical accounts. He said, I mean, there's a lot that happened, and as a Jewish person, I'd like to know more. And I thought, man, that's pretty amazing that even someone that's not a Christian realizes, you know, that they'd like to ask more of Jesus. And today, the reason I want to point that out is because even outside the Bible, we have so many historical accounts of Jesus, but we also have historical accounts of people who claimed to be the Messiah before Jesus. Outside of the Bible. Even in the Bible we have some accounts, but outside of the Bible there was people that were building up that they were like, I am going to be the next king of Israel, and you should follow after me. And I want to tell you what happened to those people. Two of those accounts can be found in Acts in the same passage. As Peter and John were drugged before the council, the Sanhedrin and everything, Gamaliel, who was on the Sanhedrin, gave this warning about two people that had claimed to be messiahs, the false messiahs. In Acts 5:36-37, this is Gamaliel speaking. He says, for before these days, Theudas rose up. He claimed to be somebody. And a number of men, about 400, joined him. He was killed, and all who followed him were dispersed and came to nothing. After him, Judas the Galilean rose up, and in those days of the census drew away some of the people after him. He too perished, and all who followed him were scattered. And there were others. Right here, this is a really nice way that he's describing this right here. But in history, what it tells us is that when these false messiahs rose up and they declared themselves to be kings, the Romans came in, killed them, and killed as many of their followers as they could get. When it says, and they were dispersed, it wasn't like they came in there and said, all right, guys, go back to your homes and stuff like that. No, what it means is that they fled, and that the ones that survived didn't come back. So when Rome found out that there was somebody claiming to be a king, it was a threat to their empire. They didn't want a rebellion to rise up. They would stamp it down. Now that's pretty pertinent to what I want to tell you today, because as you see these people standing here and Jesus is entering in and he's riding on this donkey, the passage says that they laid their coats down in front of the donkey and he rode over their coats. Perhaps we grew up on Disney and we think that's what a gentleman does for a lady over potholes or something like that. But in this time and age, the only person that was worthy of somebody laying coats down was the emperor himself. These people came out in droves in front of other witnesses as Jesus was entering into Jerusalem and were crying out to the king and laying their coats down in the road as they would, as any Roman would for the emperor. In another passage in John, because all four of the Gospels share the same account, in John 12:13 it says, so they took branches of palm trees and went out to meet him, crying out, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, even the King of Israel. They're out on the road, they have put their coats down, and then they grab palms and they're waving them in the air, and they're like, the king is here, blessed is he. And perhaps we think, well, the reason today is Palm Sunday is because sandy area over there in Jerusalem, lots of palm trees. There is. And maybe you think that they grabbed the palm trees because, like, man, that's a good attention getter. Palm tree is pretty big. Might be even creating some air. It might be hot out there. We're fanning each other and stuff like that. Getting King's attention as he comes in. I mean, I don't really know why they grabbed the palms, right? Well, the palms are very significant. Palms are extremely significant. Back in Leviticus, the Lord bestowed that they should use palms. In Leviticus 23:40 it says, "And you shall take on the first day the fruit of the splendid trees, branches of palm trees, and boughs of leafy trees, and willows of the brook, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days." This is when God delivered them. The palm signified deliverance. And then history. I told you history is important. Historically, in the time of the Maccabees, there was a rebellion. Rome was involved. And Simon the Maccabee, he recaptured Jerusalem. And you know what happened when he recaptured Jerusalem? All of Jerusalem came out. When him and his army came back into Jerusalem, guess how they greeted him? Every single person that came out in Jerusalem that greeted Christ as he came in put their life on the line. They believed he was the king so much. In front of every other witness that was out down the street, undeniable, not in the shadows, not in the corners or anything else. They came out in the open. In the open, crying that he is the king. Not that he is the magician that just entered, the miracle maker that's come, the showman of all showmans, the teacher above all teachers, the prophet that we've never seen. No, 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 no. They're declaring with their action and their words that he is the king in front of everybody. And by law, they should be punished to death. They should be punished on the spot by Rome, and they should have every expectation that that's what's going to happen. That's how much they believed as he entered into Jerusalem. But it would be fair if you were to ask me, well, Danny, what happened? What happened that week? That they went from putting their lives on the line, believing that much that they took their families out there, that they went out there in those streets in front of everybody, and God as their witness, were crying, Hosanna, Hosanna, that in 1 week, they went from putting their lives and their family lives on the line to turning their back on Jesus and decrying, crucify him. What happened? That's a fair question. And I'll tell you what happened. They were looking for what they were looking for, and when he was entering in this city, they found it. But the moment that they realized he wasn't the king that they were looking for, they no longer cared. They no longer cared. They were looking for a king that was going to throw off the yoke of the Romans. They were looking for an earthly king. And when he didn't meet their expectation, they no longer saw him as that king. They no longer saw him as their Messiah. Jesus confirms this later on in the next point, recognizing the king. In John 18:36, Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, if he was a king of the world, if he was going to set himself as a king of Israel, then my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world." This was his defense when they took him in. That's not the type of king that I came to be. And when he wasn't what they wanted, they turned their backs on him. Now, what a lesson for us today as we're preparing for Easter. Right? Because I started this off with that this Easter, we should see Jesus as the gift to our lives. It's the ultimate expression of love, the greatest love story that's ever been told. It's Christ's sacrifice for us. That gift is not just for our entrance into heaven. That gift is so that we might live the lives that He desires for us to live. Christ said, I came to give you life and give it to you in the fullest. That's in the here and now and goes on for eternity, which includes heaven. That's the gift. To live fulfilled. But I'm afraid. That just like some of those people on the streets waving their palms, that sometimes we miss out on the gift because it comes in unexpected ways and we don't accept it. Mine and Mary's 4th year of marriage was a hard year. It was so hard. We had so many things going on. We were so involved in church that I didn't work as a full-time pastor. But every moment that I could, I was working 12, 14-hour days, and then coming in and giving everything I could to the church. But during that year, everything just went to mess. That year was the hardest financial year of our marriage. The first 3, almost full 4 years, our hauling business was doing good. My dad's business was doing great. And then that 4th year, stuff started happening. We couldn't make money if we tried. It was just horrible. Couldn't make the bills. I barely could pay the workers. I could barely pay fuel bills. I was just struggling every week. We had lived fine for the first 3 years under this budget, but when something happened, we were living above our means, even though we were still doing the same thing. And it was just so hard. And Mary we had a baby, we had a toddler, we had teens in the house. Mary was working at the health department, and it was so stressful trying to do everything with the church and trying to do everything in the house and trying to take care of every kid, not having any money to do so. And then my work truck, the engine blew up. It got in some water because we work in the wood. It just blew up. Me and Mary, by necessity, needed 2 vehicles. And I remember that feeling so bad. The year before, I would have just went and bought a truck, but we couldn't make ends meet. And I don't know if I can explain that to you. We couldn't make it. We weren't making it. We were dying. I remember when that truck went out, that I sat there and I prayed so hard. And in my prayer, I was convincing, or thought I was putting on this convincing prayer to God. God, in my every waking moment, I am serving you. I am serving you. I am doing the youth at the church. I am preaching. If I am not working, if I am not feeding a baby with a bottle, I am in the Bible. I am doing every single thing that I can right now, and I need your help. I need your help. I need you to give me a truck. And as I'm crying now, it's because of the emotions that I felt then. I wanted to rip my hair out. Please, Lord, give me a truck. Somehow or another, because it's impossible for me to make it. And I expected, God works in miraculous ways and He works in mysterious ways. And in the past, there have been times where just unasked for, God will just provide. And that's what I was praying for. And if anybody, this is going to sound super sacrilegious, this is just those thoughts at the moment. If anybody in the world deserved what I was asking for at that point in time, I did. And so that was my prayer. And it was not answered. Not in the way that I expected. So I started having to go to work, and I could not get up another work truck. We had other workers, and so I started taking some of the jobs with my dad that required nobody else to be around, because I couldn't get any of the other workers anywhere. I didn't have a truck. So I would just have somebody drop me off at a work site with an excavator, and one job that I was doing was like in the swamp for a farmer, and I would go into their job. I would be dropped off with my lunch. During the day, I'd walk the excavator into the swamp, and then I would come out at night, and somebody would, right at sunset, and somebody would pick me up, and I'd go home. Phone didn't work there, nothing. I had not seen the farmer out there at all during this whole project because I'm mostly in the swamp. I had to come out one day because of a hydraulic leak at lunch, and I came out, and there was the farmer. And the farmer's like, I didn't even realize y'all were here. There's nobody out here. I said, yeah, I'm here. Well, where's your vehicle? I said, I don't have a vehicle. And short of it is that he said, well, I tell you what, I think my brother has a vehicle. If you could come in on Saturday and do a little bit of extra work, then maybe I could talk my brother and get in the vehicle, and we could just do the trade. I was like, okay. I'd like that. And so he went and he traded his brother something. He got his brother's truck. The truck was fantastic. It hadn't really been used. It was a Ford truck, but the transmission was bad. It was wonky. It wouldn't go into reverse. It'd drive forward all day long. And the work that he was asking me to do was not worth what the truck was. But I did it. I did all those things. All those things came to be. He traded something to his brother. His brother said yes. I got the truck. The truck wasn't perfect. I did the work on Saturday. All these things. It's such a long story. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to tell you is that if God could orchestrate so that the one day that I walked out of the field where I would not have on any other day, that guy was there, and that he had a willing heart to ask me what was going on in my life. If God could work out that then he knew that his brother had something, he had something that he could trade his brother so that I could get that truck, and then that I got that truck by working it off for something that wasn't as valuable as the truck, despite the fact that the truck was a real blessing. It also came with, you never park where you had to back up. All the things that God worked out, God could have easily, and all the things that he worked out, and all the things that he poured grace into that situation, God could have easily have provided me a truck. Just like that. He could have restored my truck. I could have went back out there after the engine blew, and God had the power in doing all that I could have turned the key and it just cranked up. Right? Could have done it. And when the Brownlees came out there and offered this, I probably went 5 to 6 months telling everybody what amazing people they were and how I worked that truck off on the weekends. Before at some point in time I said, I got to stop saying that. That's how God provided for that prayer. And I wasn't giving him credit for how God provided in my time of need because it didn't happen as I was expecting it to. It taught me something about my complaining heart, about my wimpy beliefs, and and how they needed to be strengthened. Taught me a lot. And there was a reason why I needed to go through that journey with God. He could have answered in any way he decided. But he decided to answer in another way so that I might learn. I want you to know, as we're looking at Palm Sunday and we're going through this in the same manner, don't be guilty of not seeing God in your life because it's not happening as you expected. Don't not accept what God wants to do in your life because it's not happening as you don't expect it. You're looking to see him in a certain way. You're looking to see him as the king that rides in and delivers you from whatever you're going through, and that might not be what he wants to do. You may have to still go through that, but he's beside you. And you can grow from it. And you can be blessed in it, because the gift of Christ is his grace, not always his deliverance. Today, if you take nothing else, take that. God wants to pour his grace out in your life. Open your eyes to him. This morning, I'm going to ask Ricky to come up. And as he comes up, this passage challenges us to examine our understanding of Jesus as the king. They thought the king was something else. He came in as the humble king. They thought he was going to provide them this. He provided eternity. Today he's wanting to do a mighty work in your life. He's wanting to bless your life. He's wanting to work in ways that maybe you haven't even thought of. Are you willing to open your heart and your mind to that? Let us stand this